Hello everybody, Mannix here. Got another classic tabletop knife review for you right here, right now. Feel free to subscribe, hit that little bell notification if you don't want to miss any future knife, gun, EDC type videos. I am making them weekly now. Anyway, let's get right into this. This is on the CRKT Columbia River Knife and Tool M21-04G. M21 happens to be the series of knives this one is in, and the particular model is the 04G. Now this is a really cool knife. It's kind of a combat tactical folder. That's kind of what it's trying to be, and at that it excels for the most part. I don't have any major complaints with it. Overall, I think it's really cool. It's relatively affordable. There's a lot to hold on to. It's a long knife. I would consider this a large size folder. It's nice looking overall. It's just there's a lot of cool things about it. Anyway, let's get the specs out of the way first, as I like to always do in my videos. But what's funny about this knife is that the specs are different depending on what websites you go to. Let's, instead of me reading them off, actually we're just going to measure them because I got different measurements on different websites. Even CRKT's official website had some somewhat misleading information. It's kind of strange. I don't know why, but let's get that blade. I think the blade is just a hair under 4 inches. I know it's a really janky ruler I'm using right here, but there's one website that said 3.98 inches. I'm going to stick with that. That's what it looks like. Handle, it's going to be just above 5 inches, it looks like. 5.25? Yeah, 5 1/4. Making the overall length, that would have to be 9 1/4 or 9.23, technically. So on my specs, it says the blade length is 3.98 inches, the handle length is 3.75 inches. That obviously isn't right. And then overall length, 9.25 inches? That doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. And depending on the website you go to, it's slightly different. But it's basically 9 1/4 inches in overall length, just about. And the blade's just about 4 inches. Handle's just about 5 1/4 inches. Cool. So it's a pretty large folder. It's about the same length of the Cold Steel Recon 1, if you're familiar with that knife. Cold Steel Large Voyager. That's going to be a little bit longer than the Spyderco Tenacious. I always mention that one because it's just a very commonly used, affordable knife. So it's a large folder, as you can see right here. We have G10 handle scales, stainless steel liners, which are skeletonized, as you can see, pretty aggressively, except for the liner lock side, not skeletonized as much. Obviously the G10 is, but the stainless steel within is not, because that is the liner that is required to lock the knife. It's not just a liner lock, it also has whoosh, the auto locks system. What's that? Essentially, it is a lock for the liner lock. It's an obstruction. See that little piece right there? That is the auto lock. So what makes it not just the manual locks is that it manually always springs back in place. As you can see from that cutout right there, it seems to take up the space when you disengage it. I'll talk about that soon. But basically, whenever you open up this knife, it automatically engages, so you cannot just close the knife with it in the way right there. You have to disengage that, then disengage the liner lock, and then you can close the knife. So that is the auto locks. Same exact thing as the manual locks, but it has a spring in there which automatically shuts it. And you can get pretty fast with it and close it with one hand if you're used to it. It took me a little bit to get used to it, but middle finger on the auto locks, thumb on the liner, and then index finger on the spine of the blade. It's really not that big of a deal. You can close it with one hand. You can get pretty used to it pretty fast. Thumb studs on here, even though they're not really thumb studs, they are blade stops because there is no blade stop in there. The blade stops are on the blade itself rather than being embedded within the handle. Is that really an advantage or not? I don't think so. I mean, they're pretty fat, but it doesn't really make a difference. You can use them as thumb studs. It's not meant to be used that way, I don't think. You can kind of reach in there and open it conventionally if you want, but it's not really easy. You really have to dig the tip of your thumb in there to do that successfully. But you can, if you dig it in there, you can flick it out, you can get used to it, practice with it, it's fine. But it's mainly a flipper knife. Weight, one website said 5.9 ounces, another website said 6.4 ounces. Again, just depends on where you go. So let's settle this once and for all on my scale right here. Let's see, it is 6.35 ounces, so it's closer to whatever website said 6.4. These retail, I believe, I say I believe because again, it's different based on where I look, but $89.99. I think on CRKT's website, as I'm filming this, late September 2022, it is selling for $68 even on CRKT's official website. I don't think that's the retail price. Maybe it's just on sale right now or something, but you can get these for about the $60 range, whether you go to Amazon, eBay, whether you go to Blade HQ, or any other knife website that has these in stock. Some have them, some don't. It's kind of a weird It's in a weird area. The knife, there's nothing wrong with the knife itself, but the information on it and where to get it kind of flip-flops and changes all over the place. I don't know why that is, but it's a knife that's been around for a good decade or so now. It's kind of older, but it's still really cool. It has its place. HCR14 MOV blade steel. Again, that's another tricky thing to find on even CRKT's website. It doesn't even say what the blade steel is at the moment. Some websites say HCR14, some say HCR14 MOV, some say 4116. Some are claiming it as a Krupp stainless. What? I don't think that's true. HCR14 is what I'm going to have to go with. It performs like it. Very similar to HCR13 MOV. A little bit soft. Not the most rust resistant, although this does have this coating on here, which is going to help with that. But it'll get razor sharp, comes out of the box razor sharp, and it will sharpen pretty quick, too. I would say even quicker than AUS 8. It just won't last forever. But for a combat blade, it doesn't really matter that much. I know that sounds contradictory, but hear me out here. Just cutting through flesh and cutting through people who are not armored or anything, it's not going to dull that fast on you. I mean, the knives that dull on you quickest are the ones that you use for work. You just cut and cut and cut. If it's a combat situation, you're not going to be cutting and cutting and cutting at a person multiple times, or at least I hope you wouldn't be doing that. If it's a defensive situation, I hope it would be one cut, one stab, that's it, boom, done. Never do that again. And I hope that never happens. But the point I'm trying to make is that soft blade steels, even cheap knives, are actually okay for defense because you just get it really sharp, keep it, never use it for anything until that dark and rainy day comes, if it ever does. And then it will perform just fine for you, most likely. So the point I'm trying to make is that HCR14 MOV is a perfectly adequate steel for self-defense so long as it has a good heat treatment, which this one does, because CRKT does a great job on their heat treatment on their knives. Thick-ass handles, there's a lot to hold on to. You can even see it protruding out like that. I have large size hands, so there's a lot to hold on to. We got some functional jimping on the spine here, which is well done. The blade is, I think, what they call a spear point, but it has a recurve on there. So it's kind of like a kukri, but it's kind of like a spear point, somewhere in between. So it's going to be very strong for piercing and stabbing. Has a very strong tip right here, as you can see. But there's a slight recurve, so it's going to be good for slashing as well. Piercing and slashing are what this knife is meant to do, it looks like. The G10 on here is nice. It's kind of a softer texture. It looks aggressive, and I thought it was going to be really aggressive, but actually it's kind of on the softer side. I would say medium softer traction. If anything, it's slightly softer than, again, the Spyderco Tenacious. That line of knives. Persistence, tenacious, resilience, ambitious. Pocket clip is excellent. Works just fine. Kind of stubby. Again, this kind of reminds me of the original Cold Steel Recon 1. Similar in some ways, even the shape of the pocket clip, the overall length of it, the thickness of it, the materials, the way it looks, it's very similar to that knife in a lot of ways. But it's a decent pocket clip, works just fine, blackened, got the logo on there, looks pretty cool. It is swappable to all four positions, tip up, tip down, left and right hand. I believe it comes tip down right hand, as you can see from that little tan line right there. But most people these days don't carry it that way. I see most people like tip up. But this is from back in the day, 10 years ago, the world was a much different place, including the knife world. And a lot of knives were coming in tip down, but a lot of people were still complaining about that back then. So, but even for back then, this knife was offered in tip up. A little bit more is going to be exposed out of your pocket if you choose to go that way. If you choose to go tip down, there's going to be a little bit less exposed out of your pocket. A lot to hold on to right here. Either way. So it's functional either way, it's fine. But again, I just prefer tip up mainly because that's my muscle memory at this point. I like the flipper on here. It's also jimped, easy to get to. It looks very industrial, kind of mechanical looking knife, torpedo, shark kind of looking. It's just cool. Cool combat looking design. Not a very friendly looking knife. It looks kind of menacing. Looks like you're going to do something bad with it. But no, actually most people who do bad things are usually not getting tactical knives. They're getting $4 piece of crap knives, or they're using screwdrivers, kitchen knives, and baseball bats, crowbars, whatever they can find. So it's ironic how the tactical looking knives that people find scary are usually not the tools used by bad people. Just saying. But it kind of looks like a scary knife. I think it's cool. Some of my favorite knives are the scary looking ones. They look like combat blades and stuff. It's just cool looking, isn't it? Again, it's big, relatively heavy, not too heavy, but it's not a lightweight knife either. G10 and stainless steel are both pretty heavy materials, and we have a big old fat wide blade right here. Skeletonized a decent amount, but it's not extremely skeletonized. It is comfortable. I like this organic curve we have right here. Then we have somewhat of a guard down there. Guard right here from the flipper. I like the bolster area right here. It's almost a perfect circle right there, of course, until you get to that point. But It's very good looking. I like the blade stop on here. It's a nice attention to detail. The track is almost perfectly aligned, or I should say, it should say perfectly aligned with the bolster of the handle. Stops right in place right there against the steel liners and the G10. So we have a good up and down lockup on here. No issues with that whatsoever. You may notice that we have a flathead pivot screw, which is kind of flush to the rest of the handle scale, which is kind of cool. It's a very nice touch. There's a lot of nice attention to detail going with this knife, and that's pretty cool too. Just the little things, these little holes they have in the G10 right here. I like the big holes exposing the blade as well as just the rest of the mechanics of the knife. It's cool and industrial looking. You can see the edge right there. So it's a good looking knife, and it is totally functional. Good lockup on this overall, and it is comfortable. I like the grip on here. It's a good tactical blade, jimping everywhere. Good lockup. The auto locks, now that I'm finally mentioning this, it's cool. I don't mind it. I don't love it. I prefer manual locks knives because it's there if you want to use it, but you don't have to use it. However, the auto locks is going to engage whether you want it to or not because it is automatic. So if you don't like that, you can take it out. If you really, really, really want this knife, but you don't like that, you can actually take this knife apart and take that out. It's not a big deal. But I'm just going to leave it in there. I don't mind it. It does strengthen the lock overall. It's not super strong or anything. It's just a little piece of steel, I assume, right there, which just assists it in not closing. It's kind of like a safety mechanism for the locking mechanism. So it strengthens it up a little bit. This is going to be stronger than pretty much any liner lock out there as long as that's engaged. But at the end of the day, it still is a liner lock. So you might find that kind of contradictory. You might think, well, why not just go with a stronger locking mechanism altogether? I guess that's a question for CRKT. But it does make it stronger, and because this knife is supposed to be a tactical folder, it's supposed to be for emergencies, for defensive situations, things like that. Even though it automatically locks in place, that is what you want. Yeah, you might think it's kind of a bitch to disengage that, but getting it engaged is the important part, especially when you are in an emergency situation, when perhaps you or someone else you know has their life on the line. So that's actually okay. I don't really mind it. For this knife's philosophy of use, that's totally adequate. It's fine. It is what it is. Another attention to detail right here. I like this little cutout in the liner on the right here, which is somewhat accommodated by a cutout in the G10. That's kind of cool. It helps dig the tip of your thumb in there just a little bit. So again, nice attention to detail right here. I like the texturing they have on the pivot screw as well. It matches up with the texturing on the blade stops / thumb studs, whatever you want to call those. It's just very cool. It doesn't look like anything was just kind of slapped on there. You know how some knives do that? They'll have a cool design. This looks good. That looks good. That looks good. And then they'll just slap on some piece of crap pocket clip or slap on some junky, cheap-looking pivot screw or some piece of hardware somewhere. This one actually looks proprietary. It looks like everything was meant for itself. Again, I like how the blade stops kind of go on what looks like a track almost. Perfectly next to that G10. Look how close that is, but it doesn't rub. It's so close. It has a nice little resting area right there, which stops it in place from over-traveling that way. Stops it for positive force, over-traveling that way. There is one complaint I do have about this knife. I don't know if it's this knife in general or that just this one in particular, but it doesn't have the best side-to-side. It's just a hair. It's not that big of a deal. Most knives have a little bit of side-to-side play, but it's kind of stiff. You can't really tell from the video, but I'm really giving it a wrist flick, and it opens up pretty much every single time, but I have to consciously give it a good wrist flick to make sure it opens. A lot of flippers, you don't even need any wrist flick at all. You just boop, you open it up and it opens, but this one's a little stiff. Now you might think, well, why not just loosen the pivot screw? I could do that, and then I wouldn't have the issue, but then I'd have even more side-to-side blade slop. So, kind of stiff. I wish it was just a little bit faster. It's not on any IKBS system. It doesn't have any ball bearings in there. That would have made this knife almost perfect. They had that IKBS on there, but I don't think they had that at the time when this was made, and they never updated the knife's design since. I believe the coating on the blade's a titanium nitride. It doesn't say that anywhere, but it feels and looks like it. But I don't know. Maybe it's not. It looks and feels just like tie-dye. It's pretty beautiful. It's like almost a matte look to it. It's not super glossy or anything, but it's not flat either. It's a very beautiful knife. It's cool looking, isn't it? Torpedo Shark combat blade. Blacktical, everything's blackened. All the hardware, the pocket clip, the liners, the G10 obviously is black. The blade is black. Everything's black on this knife, baby. It's just cool looking. Really, really awesome knife. It's one of my favorites to carry. I'm just really, really into big, bold, chunky, fat, cool, strong knives. Do I need them? Not really. For most EDC tasks, it's a little bit overkill. Even though it's not a massive, massive knife. It's a big knife, though. Keep that in mind. It's big. So it's just really cool. I like this knife. And, of course, if you're into this knife, they have other variations of it in the M21 series, as well as the M16 series. Kit Carson design, by the way. So really cool knife overall. Again, affordable, $60 range. You get these for maybe $55 if you really look around. Good lockup overall. Again, we have that extra emergency lock on there. You just have to get used to that. A little bit heavy, a little bit chunky. It's going to take up a decent amount of space, but it does carry well. I like how we have versatility with the pocket clip. It's good looking. It's comfortable. There's a lot to hold on to. Reverse grip carries just like that. It's cool. I like the blade shape. Good for slashes, good for pierces. It's thick. It's strong. Affordable. It's just a really cool knife overall. Really awesome blade. Now a couple knives I want to compare this to real quick. One is going to be the old model Cold Steel Recon 1, which again I think this looks very similar to. Similar length, both G10, both got stainless steel liners, pocket clips similar. They both have coatings on there, but we have a Teflon coating down here on the Recon 1, and then again the tie-nye, what it looks like on the M21-04G. If it is tie-nye, I don't know for sure, that's just speculation, but similar knives in some ways. You may not even be familiar with this knife right here, the old model, the original OG Recon 1 right here, baby. It's a cool knife. But it's similar to that. And then one more I'm going to roll in is a CRKT, the Gulf, one of my favorites ever. Also cool, G10 handle scale, stainless steel liners. Very different pocket clip right there, different design overall. And it's even bigger and fatter. It's a massive, massive blade. Almost the same length, but it's just a little bit wider. Black wash on that blade, sexy, so beautiful. Similar thumb studs, you can see right there, and then similar pivot screws right there too, flush mounted. Both flatheads, very interesting. Interesting. So those are the closest knives I can think of that I currently have in the collection that it's similar to. Again, these are both CRKTs, and they both share similar hardware right there. But really cool. Really, really cool knife overall. So if you like combat blades, like emergency EDC blades, things like that, this is a good one to have. Again, we have a lot to grip onto here. It's not going to be the best EDC knife, but it's a good EDC knife, and it's going to be a great tactical blade. Just make sure you can flip it out quickly. It is smooth. It's just a little bit. This one's a little stiff. You may want to loosen that just a little bit. And you don't have to worry about the disengagement, because even if you hate liner locks for whatever reason, hey, we got an auto locks on there, and that's going to help. Really cool. One last detail I do want to show right here. I like how the jimping it's kind of useless how it does this, but aesthetically it's really awesome. How the blade kind of wraps around. Again, nice attention to detail right here on this knife. It wraps around the circular bolster area right there, and it's also jimped all the way around. You'll never need jimping unless you're holding it in this position. I don't know why. Maybe, I guess if you're using it as a non-lethal impact tool or something, sure. I don't think that's what they intended to do there, though. As you can see, the jimping goes hidden under there and it becomes completely useless, except for the portion up here on the spine. Just cool attention to detail. Anyway, that is the CRKT M21-04G. There's a couple of variants on this. There's a frame lock, and then there's an FRN version, but they're similar knives, similar shapes, similar lengths. Pick your poison, but this one's my favorite of them. So anyway, that's it. Really cool knife.